Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mike's, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. I am Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
Happy holidays.
Ruben Bressler.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yes, you got that Christmas sweater going on.
I do. I have Santa getting lit up is what this is.
Our little sparkles to the occasion, just a little.
Yeah, so for those who are listening on the podcast, Ruben, what exactly is on your sweater?
Oh, it's just Santa enjoying a nice tall frosty mug of beverage.
Let me
in
just
my
clarify.
ugly Christmas sweater.
The mug takes up a good half of Ruben's body. This isn't
Sure.
a tiny, discreet mug like that little crocodile. Oh,
No.
It's,
This is sort of it's a trick of the eye. It's not that the mug is actually that big. It's just that he's cheersing towards you, like my fist is right now on the camera.
The overflowing suds. It's all
Right.
It's all very festive.
is it an overflowing chalice, if you will?
Right.
Wow. All right, then. We also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most luxuriant and letting us know what block we did not choose as one of our top 10 blocks. Ruben?
So we didn't have as many competing choices this week, only 25 blocks all time, as compared to several hundred Magic cards usually when we do the show, not counting Aaron's block list, of course, which of course is the best block of all time. But this week's winner goes to Kyle Carson, who writes, while the original Ravnica is great, Return to Ravnica is one of the best blocks of all time. Not only did it introduce more people, like myself, to Ravnica, but it also gave much-needed reprints of Shocklands. On top of it all, Commander was starting to grow at that time, and the pile of legendary creatures provided made for great games for months. Yes, Dragon's Maze was pretty bad, but I still enjoy my Maze's End decks. Lastly, the block showed us what a successful return block was going to look like. All the best, Cowboy Kyle.
Now, I've had the pleasure of playing Commander with Kyle at various events, and he's incredibly lovely. You should follow him on Twitter if you're not. But also, Return to Ravnica just left a very big impression on older formats. You know, you have cards like Abrupt Decay, Detention Sphere, Supreme Verdict. I mean, this was really the set that, and for me, that's a big thing that I look at when I judge a set and cards, which we'll certainly talk about a little later. But I look for multi-format impact, and this block really had that in spades.
Absolutely.
I like a lot of things that it was doing. I don't like sort of the format as it ended up being, basically because Sphinx's Revelation was so good, and it was one of those cards that you didn't know you lost the game, but you lost the game.
Well, that card, I feel like we're still kind of paying for the sins of Sphinx's Revelation. You know, look at the draw spells that we've been given since then. You get, the Ugin's Insight, you get that weird pull from Tomorrow, but you can tell that they are still very skittish when it comes to giving us card draw, and specifically blue-white card draw, because they don't want to make that mistake again. And even Supreme Verdict, look at the board wipes we've gotten since then. Languish, End Hostilities, Ritual of Soot. We will never have it as good as we have it. Blue-white players specifically will never have it as good as they had it.
I mean, right now, as we record this, Ravnica Allegiance is being spoiled slowly, so we don't know everything that's going to be in the set, but Sphinx's Insight should not be 4 mana. Like, the reason that is 4 mana is because it was too good at 3 mana. I fully believe that, because Wizards has not given you a instant speed divination, anything close to it, since Thirst for Knowledge or something?
We got Glimmer of Genius, which was cute, but
that's 4 mana.
Right.
Chemister's Insight, which they're just so
They'll give you filtering. They'll give you catalog, for example.
Yeah.
But they won't give you just draw 2 cards for 3 mana, even if it's blue-white and a generic mana, which is what I was kind of expecting. And so, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's not very good. It's fine.
Right.
Either way, Return to Ravnica certainly made an impact on a whole lot of people. It was great. I'll never forget not knowing how Evolve works and going through the whole set review with Brad and us going, why is this way? What does this mean? We were smart people. It was great. All I know is this week we're talking about the top 10 cards of 2018. As much as I want to love and talk about the new cards from Guilds Ravnica, we did kind of go 9 months with Amonkhet and Kaladesh just kind of weighing down. Yeah. All these bands weighing down as that sort of sad format limped along. So that did color.
Now we're in an era of a sort of 5-piece metagame where brews have a chance to survive and any given deck can win in any given week. We're living in an era of the folks at Wizards like Andrew Brown and
Play design team.
Play design team,
Mm-hmm.
putting together a good, lush, interesting standard format. So I think we're in a good place.
I mean, it's Ravnica standard, which is always
Oh,
great, which is great. But however, let's see, Ruben, you have a higher on number 10. Is that correct?
Correct. I have a higher at number 10.
All right,
Start
Aaron.
off strong.
Aaron, let's kick you off. What is your number 10?
So as I mentioned earlier, I really look for an impact on multiple formats. And so a lot of the cards on my list got people talking in more than one format, or they made a huge impression in one particular format. And my number 10 is a card that I was really excited about from the jump. A lot of people tagged me in it because it had the word graveyard in it. People were very excited to test it in all of the formats, particularly Legacy and Vintage. And it never really took off. Like, it was cute, but it didn't really, bring anything new to the table. Some enterprising folks tried to make it happen in Standard, but it has a huge target on its back, so no one was ever going to let you have it. So it mostly got relegated to Commander, where it became an incredibly popular commander. If you go on MTG Goldfish, I believe there are over 900 user-submitted decks with this commander alone, making it the second most popular deck on MTG Goldfish. I myself built it as my commander, and I've just been having a really, really good time with it. I even got the playmat with this character on it. My number 10 is Muldrotha the Gravetide. So Muldrotha is 3 colorless, a black, a green, and a blue. She's a legendary creature, elemental avatar, 6/6. During each of your turns, you may play up to 1 permanent card of each permanent type from your graveyard. If a card has multiple permanent types, choose one as you play it. And there are some commanders out there that are so powerful you don't even have to go all in. Like, I know when this card first came out, people were like, use Lotus Petal and use Lion's Eye Diamond, all of these really expensive cards. I remember building Abe Sargent's $40 deck, which I found on coolstuffinc.com, and still running the table with a very tight budget restriction. And Sharoom is another one of those commanders where you don't even have to try and you're doing powerful things. Pair it up with Deadeye Navigator, which is like a 50-cent card, and Deadeye Navigator resets the claws. So you don't even have to put money into this. You don't need Life from the Loam. You don't need Lion's Eye Diamond. You can run, draft uncommons with this and a couple rares and still have a really good time. I love the flavor of it being Multani's Child, a callback to Dominaria, which I'm sure we'll talk about more. But this card really did take off in Commander, and I love that people are playing it.
This card, first of all, this card is fantastic in Singleton for Magic Arena. I know you guys don't know what that program is. It's really exciting from Wizards of the Coast. Just try it out. You can download it for free.
I'll get there eventually.
It's weird. But they have a Singleton format that's super fun to play because the wild cards really work really well with it. And my Muldrotha deck was unbelievably fun, super powerful. Also, this card's only like $3.50. This is the exact type of card that you go back and listen to a top 10, in 2022 and go, Muldrotha was $3.50. Buy a ton of this card, sit on it, talk to me in 5 years, and the thing will be God knows what at that point. So
I also really love the Magic story where Muldrotha got introduced. The Weatherlight had just arrived in the land previously known and still sort of known as Urborg, to go head towards the final battle, and they were about to get destroyed by Yargle, the giant frog spirit, and Slimefoot sort of accidentally, on purpose, summons Muldrotha as a defender, sort of ally, sort of enemy, to distract Yargle, essentially, and the Weatherlight was just watching the Gravetide take on the Glutton of Urborg, and just sort of went, we're gonna go now.
That's
weird.
Now?
We can go now.
That's squishy.
While these two titans battled against each other.
There's a lot of squish there. All right.
Really neat. A really neat fact about her. If you look at the playmat, it's a bit of zoomed in art, and you can actually see things floating inside of her. Like, people really weren't sure what she was made up of, whether or not it was energy. It appears to be some sort of gelatinous liquid. But if you look really closely, you can see like a boat floating. You see people. Look, they're getting swept up in there. It's amazing art.
Wow, Jello boat people. That's what Muldrotha's
Jason
made.
Greenville doing a wonderful job.
That's awesome. All right, so my number 10 here is one of those cards that essentially got out of the bannings, missed the bannings, became a staple of a staple. And I also tried to look at cards not just that were in one deck or in multiple decks, or saw just kind of ubiquitous play, and saw play in old sort of the beginning of the format and for the format is now. There's some of those coming down the pike. For this one, it more or less defined anything that used energy was always using this card when they could, because it's the closest thing you're going to get to the millionth edition of Can This Beat Dark Confidant. Glint Sleeve Siphoner cannot be Dark Confidant, but it can be good enough to get you there for maybe a couple extra cards.
Oh, yeah.
Glint Sleeve Siphoner is a black and generic mana for a rare human rogue that has Menace. It is a 2/1, and whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you get an energy. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay 2 energy. If you do, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. So if you play the land that gives you energy and you play Glint Sleeve Siphoner, you have enough energy to cash in on a card next turn. So then you have you have to answer this card, or otherwise I'm getting card advantage. And that was cool and all, but just the raw power of this card just saw play after just over and over and over all the top 8 lists. I went through all the top 8 lists of standard GPs from the year, and basically for those 9 months or whatever, Glint Sleeve Slivener was hanging out and in winning decks.
It was definitely one of the better Bob imitations we've seen, because we've seen plenty. We've seen Painseer, we've seen Blood Scrivener, we've seen Asylum Visitor, you know, all of these cards that people swear are going to be the next Bob. And I remember when this card first came out, those same people peeked out like little meerkats. They were like, it's the next Bob. And I was like, no, get back in your hole. It's fine. Right. But you know, this did end up being a card in tier 1 strategies that was good. And I've certainly used them, and I've certainly been facing them. And I think it was one of the better ones we've seen.
Yeah, and it saw infinite play, and it's just one of those cards I think helps define the year, as it were. So let's move on here to number 9. Ruben, what's your number 9?
So my number 9 is another beloved character from the Dominaria story, and the return of a character that we wanted to see for a very long time. It was very rarely do you have the trailer for a set build up excitement in a way that when Karn showed up, people really were like, oh man, this is something else. This is getting real for this Dominaria set. So my number 9 is Karn, Scion of Urza.
Nice.
Karn is a 4-mana legendary planeswalker Karn, mythic from Dominaria. Enters the battlefield with 5 loyalty and has a +1 ability. So it's going to be good enough.
Already, it's
+1,
okay.
Reveal the top 2 cards of your library. An opponent chooses one of them. Put that card into your hand and exile the other with a silver counter on it. -1, put a card you own with a silver counter on it from exile into your hand. -2, make an Evan Irwin. So it makes a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control.
Yeah.
This card was very popular in a number of different archetypes, from various types of control to even mid-range to the Turbo Fog deck to older formats even. People were testing it in Legacy and Vintage and obviously Modern as well. Just a very cool card. The flavor of having it get silver counters on, or silver tokens or silver counters on them, because Karn is the silver golem. Scion of Urza with the Urza stained glass window in the background. It's just a really iconic, interesting, and also expensive card from maybe the best set that we've seen in a very long time.
My first taste of this card was during the VSL. I was with the Hornet Queens. Rachel Agnes, I believe, had made a deck called What Incarnation, where she was playing vintage shops with Karn, Scion of Urza. And I remember we talked about this a little in the pre-show, but VSL is a really great place for strategies to gain some validity and some recognition. And to see this card that people were like, what is she doing with Karn? This is vintage. And then to see, being able to cheat it out and go, all right, here's a turn 1 Karn. I have all these artifacts that are Moxen. Here's something pass, and then just to see how out of control it could get, I really feel like that helped put Karn on the map in terms of older formats. And it does see play in Vintage from time to time, and it does see play in Legacy and even Modern. And I think in addition to Standard, we knew it was going to see play in Standard. I don't think anybody doubted that. But whether or not it was going to see play in older formats was kind of a coin flip. And it also opened the door for Atlas Crafts, that amazing cosplay that we saw at so many GPs, was inspired by this card.
One of the most iconic Magic cosplays of all time.
And just really raised the bar. Yeah,
it was incredible. And this card, it saw a ton of play from the instant it was spoiled. Super hype. And kudos to the play design team. This card is not overpowered, and yet is only 4 generic mana, and yet gives you up to 6 loyalty the turn it comes into play, while also being thematic in that it's kind of looking through time, and it's leaving silver counters, because silver is the only thing that can travel through time. It doesn't die. Have you seen the conspiracy theory that someone came up with on the Magic subreddit about silver being a central part of the story?
No.
Karn has already introduced these silver counters, and how silver is the only element that can pass through time. And why would Emrakul allow themselves to be trapped in the moon? why would they allow that to why would she allow Tamio to trap them in the moon? Well, on Innistrad, the moon is made of silver. So it's the conspiracy theory is that Emrakul is using the moon to go back in time to be able to do all this stuff. And there's some other Nicol Bolas tie-in as well with all of that. It's really interesting.
Wow. Okay. Well, that just one more facet of how cool this card is. What it meant in terms of, you know, just the characters and the story and the history of Dominaria and all these people coming back to the game and all the people getting excited because we're going to get to see all these characters that we love again. And it was great. It's a really good card. You know, these days they actually give the good characters the good cards, and that's nice. Except for Jaya. It's fine. It's whatever.
Didn't make my top 10 list.
Woo! Ouch. Well, Aaron, you have a higher on your number 9. Is that correct?
My 9 and my 8 are both higher.
Aha. All right. Well, let me tell you, my number 9 will surprise no one. We have spoken many a word about it. It is an overpowered mess. It is a card that was made to sell sets, and sell sets it did. You bought lots of packs of Hour of Devastation because the Scarab God was in it. The Scarab God was a black, blue, and 3 generic mana for a 5/5 mythic legendary god. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses X life, and you scry X, where X is the number of zombies you control. It has black, blue, 2 generic mana, exile target creature card from a graveyard, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. And it has another ability, because clearly, when the Scarab God dies, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. This thing is an unkillable, unstoppable mess. It saw play in a ton of decks. There was Grixis Energy stuff. There was the God Pharaoh decks that used it. Anybody and everybody that could get their hands on black and blue mana ran a Scarab God. And it's one of those cards that it holds an entire format down under it, in that if you can't answer it, your deck is worthless. If you can't stop it, your deck is worthless. So like, it's such a, you know, it's a fun card in that it's powerful, and I like playing with big scary things, but it's also a very oppressive card because it's so good.
Yeah. I remember we were recording this show. We were doing our live show on a Wednesday night. I remember Wedge got to preview it. We were towards the end of our episode. And I remember you had said, Evan, I think you were like, oh, Wedge's preview's up. And I remember just looking at it on live camera and being like, I was like, shut up. I was like, how is this real? I don't understand. And I remember I went to my local commander pod the following Sunday, and one of the people in my pod was like, I'm just going to proxy this thing up. You guys said, okay, I just want to test it out, see how it works. And we were like, sure, not really thinking that big of, that much of it. And then him just dominating the table. And we were like, oh, this is going to be a problem. And like you said, you were either playing the Scarab God or you had a plan against it. And there were so many games I can think of where you get to that point. It's like, do I have an answer? Nope, scoop them up. Just don't even bother, because you have no chance. And it was just so good.
Yeah, it basically just dominated for the rest of standard for most of the year until it finally rotated out. And yeah, it's weird to me because, not just where it was I making videos back in the day, but having sort of like a news show, and we talk about the news and when stuff shows up and the sort of the feeling of the community and stuff like that. It's always crazy to me to see like this entire life cycle. We saw it from its birth, and we saw it as it left the format. And there's so many times when that happens when I'm just like, oh, thank God. Like when Bitter Blossom left standard, like it was just such a relief. You're just like, thank you. Like when Hazoret and Scarab God, you're just like, just go. It's cool. Thanks. That's that.
Had enough of these godforsaken cards.
Tell you what. All right, so let's move on here to number 8. Ruben, what's your number 8?
My number 8 is my first entry from Guilds of Ravnica on my list. And I don't think it made an appearance in our top 10 Guilds of Ravnica cards. Some people sort of were like, I wonder if this will work. It might get there. It's interesting. And then it proceeds to be a staple of the format immediately. Not only that, it canonically introduces coffee to the world of Ravnica. My number 8 is Experimental Frenzy.
Yes.
Experimental Frenzy is a 3 colorless and a red enchantment. It is a rare from Guilds of Ravnica. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play the top card of your library. You can't play cards from your hand. And for 3 colors and a red, destroy itself. Turns out coffee is the weird aunt of invention.
There is... sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say there's a deck floating around vintage called Hot Coffee, which revolves around this card. And
Oh, perfect. Awesome. What does it do?
it's a typical oath deck that happens to have frenzy, and then you're able to kind of bounce everything and do it all over again. And yeah, it's hilariously fun.
Well, even in standard, where you're not doing anything particularly broken in the Boros and the mono red decks, if you top deck Experimental Frenzy, it might as well say draw 3 cards, draw 4 cards, draw 9 cards. If you're able to just play Experimental Frenzy and go land, Healer's Hawk, Legion's Landing, shock your guy, there was a game during the Pro Tour where the mono red player was hellbent, had no cards in hand, and the control player had tapped out. And as long as Frenzy wasn't the top card, the control player was going to be able to turn the corner. Frenzy's the top card, play 3 more creatures, then next turn untap with 6-7 mana, and completely just go off. This one kind of came out of nowhere for me. I mean, you guys know I love me a red top end card like Outpost Siege as much as the next guy, but this one caught me off guard, and I couldn't be happier to be surprised.
I was glad that it ended up paying off, because this was a card, at least in the circles that I run in, that people knew there was something there. No one knew what, but people were just like, there's this one. And sometimes you're right and sometimes you're wrong. And this one ended up seeing play in vintage. It sees play in modern in the new Phoenix decks, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. You pair this with things like Manamorphose and Desperate Ritual, or if that's your top card, all right, cool. And then you play something like Monastery Slipspear, and it is very easy to just kind of chain. And I remember I did a mono red stream the other day, my last Patreon stream, where I discovered the joy of it. And I was like, I'm not winning the game at all, but this is so much fun. And I'm just playing nonsense and just going and going and going, and just a really unique card, and one that I'm so happy people have discovered. And even if it is just in sort of a linear aggro strategy, that's fine. If you're doing combo Manamorphose, that's fine too, but it has a home somewhere, and I'm so happy.
This is the perfect kind of card that I say something stupid about, and then people say it about, they bring it up for the next 5 years of my life. You know what I mean? Like, I'll be like, Experimental Frenzy card is insane. It's going to see play all the way back to vintage, and then nothing happens, and they go, hey, remember Experimental Frenzy, bro? And I'm just like, yeah, but...
Hey, sometimes experiments go right, and sometimes they go wrong.
Sometimes they just frenzy right out. This card is sick. This is a great example of a card that you have to kind of see it. When you see it happen, you're like, I didn't think about having really cheap stuff in my deck and then being able to just play all those over and over again. And if I don't whiff on a land, oh my God, and that was kind of the eye-opening moment. Was the first time I saw it in play. I was like, oh, that card's the truth. Woo, crazy. All right. So my number 8 is certainly a card after Ruben's heart, as it were. This is the card that had one of my... I should go back and do this if I can. I don't know if I can, but I'd love to see sort of like what is my most liked, my most retweeted stuff of the year, right? I don't think it's from this year, but regardless, one of my most liked and favorited retweets or tweets of all time was when I said, a coworker showed me the Hazaret the Fervent invocation, and it looks like Hazaret the Pervert, and I can't unsee it. And it was like 500 likes and 300 retweets or something ridiculous. Right. Hazaret the Fervent is an incredible Magic card and is incredibly good, and was meant to be a format all-star, and was. Hazaret the Fervent is a red and 3 generic mana for a mythic legendary god. She is a 5/4 indestructible haste, and she can attack or block unless you have 1 or fewer cards in hand. However, she also has another ability of red, 2 generic mana, discard a card, she deals 2 damage to each opponent. So she can get rid of the cards in your hand to turn herself on. She has haste, so she's an incredible top deck. She's indestructible, so she's hard to deal with. She basically ran the red format, the red aggro, the red-black aggro, all the aggros. If you were aggros, you were pretty much running Hazarets, and that card was a monster.
Gave us that amazing coverage moment of Nam Wing Chung, who, thought he had enough cards, against PV, and, ended up not having enough cards to really make her active or kind of turn her on. And so he wasn't able to attack with her and basically cost himself the game. And, that kind of turned into his sort of Taylor Swift moment where, he could have easily, been embarrassed and hid away and never played another tournament. And he made it his brand. He would tweet about playing red decks after that, and he was laughing at himself. And, that was a moment that really endeared us to someone who we might have never heard of had that moment not happened. And yeah, Hazaret being a surprisingly good card, being one of the sole surviving god. If you look at the, the storyline, all of the other gods got killed one way or another, except for Earl Hazaret. So she's still on whatever's left of Amonkhet, and I'd like to know what happens. I was really rooting for her.
Yeah, I guess we will see.
Yeah, I love me a Hazaret. I've probably cast more Hazarets than y'all have combined.
Probably.
Standard deck for a while. It is such a good, I like Experimental Frenzy on turn 4. I love me a Hazaret. Boy howdy, let me tell you. Nothing warms the cockles of my burning red mage heart like attacking with 5 indestructible god damage.
Those cockles are sizzling, y'all.
And I said god damage.
All right, let's move on here to number 7. I don't have one. It's higher on someone else's list. The first of 3 for me. But Aaron, you have a number 7. What is it?
I do. So Guilds of Ravnica at first just didn't do it for me. I had really big expectations for this set going into it. And I remember they revealed the Golgari mechanic, which was Undergrowth. It's Undergrowth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just didn't do it for me. And rares are coming out and uncommons are coming out. And they're like, Aaron, Mausoleum Secrets, which still ain't gonna see play. Clock is ticking, Erwin.
Look, if I'd have picked Experimental Frenzy instead of Mausoleum Secrets, Mausoleum Secrets would have broken a format by now, just in half.
But people were trying, so mythics are coming out, rares are coming out. People are just checking out on me. They're like, Aaron, anything. And I'm like, it's fine. And then an uncommon came out. And my world changed. And the minute I saw it, I just was like, I did the gay gasp, and I couldn't see, I couldn't breathe, and it just made me feel alive. And before we knew it, Modern Dredge had become the #1 deck in the format. It was single-handedly responsible for making that deck good again. It's seen a little bit of play in Standard, but really what brought it home was Modern. My number 7 is Creeping Chill. So Creeping Chill is 3 colorless and a black. It is a sorcery. It says Creeping Chill deals 3 damage to each opponent, and you gain 3 life. And let it be known, I have hardcast plenty of these, and it feels great. When Creeping Chill is put into your graveyard from your library, you may exile it. If you do, Creeping Chill deals 3 damage to each opponent, and you gain 3 life. I lovingly call it Frightening Helix. Shout out to our friend Aaron from the Discord for introducing me to that. But this card just reinvigorated an archetype. Yeah, you can use it with Surveil, and that's cute, but if you're dredging into this, I've heard so many horror stories of people who've dredged 3, and 2 of them are Creeping Chills. You can't counter it. You can't counter it. It can't be, if you have a Grafdigger's Cage out, it goes right through it. This changed our burn matchup significantly. Burn was always sort of 50-50 for us. Oh no, girl. We're doing much better now. And it just changed everything. And it just propelled the deck straight to the top again. And I love it. And it was just, of all the cards you could get excited about, was it a mythic? Was it a rare? Was it a legendary creature? Just a 40-cent uncommon.
It's one of the, it's free. And turns out that's great.
Great. Turns out free things are great.
You're like, but you're paying 4 mana for, sorcery, lightning helix to the what? It doesn't matter. I'm not paying anything for this. Free.
Exiling it to my unmask, or it's coming off of my wand of vertebrae.
Manaless Dredge. Yeah, they've been putzing around with it a little bit because you can just, if it happens to be a dead card in your hand, you pitch it to your Phantasmagorian and it's fine. You pitch it to your unmask. Fantastic.
This would have been in my top 10. Had I not already decided in my head, guaranteed it's going to be on Aaron's list. Turns out my number 10 was higher anyway, so I probably could have had this at 8, 9, 10, but it's definitely deserving. Brought Dredge back from the dead. You always think Dredge is dead, but it always comes back from the graveyard. And Creeping Chill certainly well deserving of a spot on this.
I also enjoy that, there's certain things that you watch the cards go by, and I love these little notes where this card shows up and everyone's just like, wow, that looks ridiculous. You're like, you think it's going to work in Dredge? I don't know if it's going to work in Dredge. Well, what are you going to take out for it? I don't know what we're going to take out for it. This card's stupid. Why are you playing this card? I don't know. So blah, blah. There's this kind of whispering, then all of a sudden the lists kind of start coming out and you're just like, oh, it's so good. And there's that awesome, I feel good because my deck's now awesome moment. Aaron got that this time with Creep and Chill. Of oh, my favorite thing is great. There's going to be I think there's going to be a Merfolk thing happening. Just guessing, but for Ravnica Allegiance, some ridiculous Merfolk craziness is going to happen, and all the Legacy Merfolk people are going to lose their mind because their favorite tribe's all good all of a sudden. That's great. I love it. All right, let's see here. So Ruben, what's your number 7?
My number 7. We need to talk about the elephant in the room, which is this card. This card is the biggest thing that happened in the room at the VIP party at GP Vegas, where everybody got together after our day of panels and tournaments and all that stuff. And then Channel Fireball hosted a panel where they got to preview some cards. And they saved the best for late. They previewed Vivian Reed, and we got to see a Johnny. And for the very first time, we got to see Nicol Bolas the Ravager. And you come at the king, you best not miss. The biggest, baddest character in the Magic storyline got a card. Again, very good card, good mythic, that isn't completely overpowered and busted and isn't going to break anything, doesn't require mana. Nicol Bolas the Ravager is a colorless, a black, a blue, and a red for a 4/4 flying creature. 4/4 flying for 4 mana. When Nicol Bolas the Ravager enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. So already 4/4 flying Ravenous Rats. If you pay 7 mana, 3 of which are the Grixis colors, you exile Nicol Bolas and return it to the battlefield under its owner's control as a sorcery. And then the flip side is Nicol Bolas the Arisen, which has 7 loyalty and has a +2 draw 2 cards, -3 deal 10 damage to target creature or planeswalker, -4 reanimate target creature or planeswalker card from any graveyard and put it in play under your control, -12 exile all but the bottom card of target player's library. Does everything that you possibly wanted to do. Immediately goes up to 9 loyalty, and drawing 2 cards is one of the biggest things that it does. But yeah, Nicol Bolas the Ravager was a very exciting return, a big integral part of the story. People were really looking forward to seeing what Nicol Bolas did, and did not disappoint.
Certainly inspired a lot of EDH decks. I remember in the weeks after its release, I saw more people at the shop showing up with Bolus EDH, and I was like, ugh. I'm just, if one bolus is a problem, then having to deal with 2 or 3 is just too much, where it's like, stop.
Gross. Wow. This card is a powerhouse of a Magic card in terms of what it's doing on rate. It's already up on card advantage. It's the ability to flip over into a planeswalker, so you can't really use anything sort of enchantment type removal on it unless it's Ixalan's Binding, for example. And I mean, that's a hell of a flip walker over there. Like, that is, I have arisen to power, I do everything, I crush, I come back to life, and then the ultimate FU, the all but one. You get
all but the bottom. That card that you scried to the bottom, you get to keep.
And it's fine. Like, it hasn't, I know some people predicted it was going to be too powerful, but I mean, I think since rotation, has it really seen play?
No, not really. This is one of those things where we're also waiting for, Rakdos to come back. We're waiting for Blood Crypt to show back up in terms of a playable card in Standard. So I think it needs a little bit more fixing, but once it has that fixing along with whatever is good in Rakdos that can use Nicol Bolas, that's terrific too. Okay. But this is definitely a card that is so powerful you can't necessarily ignore it. So let's move here to number 6. All right. Ruben, what's number 6?
So we had a new card type introduced this year, a new card subtype, I should say, the Saga, which came out with Dominaria, and probably the most impactful saga in Standard was the History of Benalia.
Mm-hmm.
The Saga is a very exciting card type. All of the arts were gorgeous. This Noah Bradley stained glass window, of course, being one of the most iconic. And of course, it saw a ton of Standard play as well. The History of Benalia is a colorless, a white, and a white for an enchantment Saga. As it enters the battlefield, and after your draw step, you add a lore counter, and after the 3rd chapter, as it were, you sacrifice the History of Benalia. Chapters 1 and 2 create a 2/2 knight creature token with vigilance, a white knight. And then chapter 3 pumps all of your knights. Knights you control get +2/+1 until end of turn. Became a invaluable part of the Boros decks that dominated the Pro Tour. Being knights is fine, but also being tokens in general, good for that green-white tokens deck. Just an excellent value card. And I recall on this show, we thought that this originally was going to be an uncommon, I think, because we were like, wow, they must, if this is a mythic, that's a signal that this card's really good. Turns out this card's really good. Turns out this card is insane. So History of Benalia, I think you have to have we have to have a saga somewhere. We have to talk about how that is just it's a paradigm shift not just in terms of art but in terms of function. Sort of being a pseudo planeswalker a little bit.
Shout out to my friend.
Benalia, I think is the one to do.
Oh, sorry about that. I was just saying, shout out to our friend Nick Prince, who's had a lot of success this season with his green-white Celestia list. He swears by History of Benalia, and such a versatile card. You know, you can play it in an aggressive strategy, like a token strategy. I remember playing mono-white approach for the last couple weeks of Standard, and we were boarding it in against the control decks, where, you know, it's just sometimes it's something you can bring back, and being a permanent, you can call that permanent back and then do it all over again. And so a very versatile card like that. You know, I was not really sold on the sagas when they first came out. Like, I didn't really get it. And after seeing cards like History of Benalia, I get it. And now I'm a huge fan, and I'm so happy that they're here.
Yeah, as Rosewater likes to say, in terms of calling the story out, which is Planeswalkers originally began this way, which is they do a thing, then they do a thing, and then they do an ultimate thing. And that's cool, but if you don't catch them on the right way, then it does like something stupid. It'll pump things you don't have, or it'll target something that you don't have anymore, or whatever. So these are sort of very simplified, straightforward versions of that in terms of it does thing and boom. And History of Benalia, again, we thought it was an uncommon, so we're just like, oh, that card's kind of neat. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait, that's mythic. And it's like, oh, that card must be insane. And yeah, it's pretty freaking terrific.
I really want sagas to come back. I hope that sagas are not a plane dependent card type, because places like Ravnica, for example, have tons of deep history and lore, and you know, Mirrodin and Zendikar have lots of history behind them that I think would be interesting to explore with stories. You know, if there was a Song of Night and Day that when we return to Dominaria, that we could make a something like that, or the Brothers' War, or the Tale of the Weatherlight people, or if we go back to Theros and we tell stories about Elspeth and all of that kind of stuff.
I'll throw this out there. I would love if at least one, maybe even all of them, but let's just say at least one of every story spotlight card in a set is a saga.
That'd be cool.
Tell your most important story point via the saga.
That's right.
I think that you know, you only have like 2 planeswalkers per set. I think that you could reasonably have 2 sagas per set.
Right. And then we can start getting excited about what sagas are in the set alongside what planeswalkers, because these are very unique, very powerful effects. We're used to that. We know that. These will be mythics. I would expect them to be very powerful and impactful. They're story moments.
At the very least, put them in supplemental products like commander sets, you know, sets that kind of transcend one plane. You know, those sets kind of are amalgamations of different planes and characters. I think that'd be a good spot for them too, if not in standard.
Absolutely. Right. So, Aaron, what's number 6?
My number 6 is a card that has been around, and the strategy has been around, but I really feel like in the last 12 months, we've seen so much talk about this card, not in a good way. A lot of people point to this card and say that this is kind of everything wrong with Modern. You know, the people who don't like Modern, you know, they love to say that this card is emblematic of the reason why. My number 6 is Krark Clan Ironworks, also known as KCI. So Krark Clan Ironworks is 4 colorless. It's an artifact from 5th Dawn. It's a sacrifice an artifact, and 2 colorless your mana pool. What's wrong with that? Well, when you play a bunch of crappy artifacts like Ichor Wellspring, you know, some other things, and you kind of form these loops, you know. This is the one card that anytime there's a ban list discussion, people are saying, can you please take Krark Clan Ironworks away? You know, if you think Dredge is not interactive, you haven't seen this baby go off. Now they have War of Invention. You know, they're main decking Grafdigger's Cages because they can search for them. Spine of Itchsaw is the new hotness now. It is a combo that is so difficult to interact with. Emma Handy wrote an article and just talked about, if it ain't Leyline, don't bother. And even then you're not safe. You know, it can survive multiple surgical extractions. Ancient Grudge doesn't care. It's just an extremely resilient, powerful combo deck that has really shined a really bad light on Modern. A lot of the pros swear by it, and even they're like, look, man, I'm playing because it's good, not because I like it. And it's just a nightmare of a card, and I feel like just the conversation around it just got so loud this year, and it'll be interesting to see if it maintains its hold on the format in 2019.
It's one of those cards that you can clearly see it can be busted in so many ways. It's free sacrifice, it's sacrifice that gives you mana. Those 2 things alone are the start of so many infinite combos in Magic. It doesn't matter. This thing's an $11 uncommon. You know how many garbage
I got
copies of
it
this
when it
card
was,
I
I
have.
remember getting it from my Shroom deck, and I think I paid 5, and it was so funny watching it become a good card. And I remember I played a Shroom deck recently, and people were like, "Oh, how much did that set you back?" And I was like, $5. And I was like, I got it before it was good. I didn't think anything of it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the foil is $30 for this freaking thing. This is just, it's very reminiscent of eggs. I actually don't think they're going to keep it around too much longer because those types of very uninteractive, let's watch somebody do something for 15 minutes while they finish killing their opponent and showing the loop or whatever, are just bad for Magic in general. They're bad experiences for players, in my opinion. They're bad experiences for coverage. This is the exact type of card where we go, you know, I get it. It's cool and powerful, but no thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, just moving on. So I wanted to talk about a card that originally showed up in Rivals of Ixalan, and it was immediately joked that it was Alex Bertoncini's invitational card. But it was damn good, and it was damn good from the moment it was printed. It saw play from the moment it was printed. It still sees play to this day in all sorts of decks and all sorts of very powerful winning decks. This card's been good. From the moment we saw it, Jade Light Ranger is not the invitational winning card for Alex Bertoncini. However, it does explore twice now, doesn't it? Jade Light Ranger is 2 green and generic mana for a 2/1 rare Merfolk Scout. And when she enters the battlefield, it explores, then it explores again, that being reveal the top card of your library. Put that card into your hand if it's a land. Otherwise, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, then put that card back put the card back or put it into your graveyard. Then repeat this process. So you got to explore twice, or draw 2 cards, which I'm totally okay with for a 3-mana 2/1, or do nothing if they have the Tocatli Honor Guard or whatever.
Well, or it's a 3/2 that draws a card. Like all 3 versions of it, it's a Knight of Autumn that you don't really get to choose. I mean, a 2/1 that draws 2 cards, I'd happily take. A 4/3 for 3 mana, most situations I'd happily take, and a 3/1 that draws a card, I would usually happily take. So you don't get to decide which mode you choose, but it's certainly been very powerful, particularly recently with the popularity of the Wild Growth Walker Golgari decks, where you want to fuel your graveyard anyway. It's a really good value card. It won a Grand Prix in a red-green monsters strategy alongside cards like Rekindling Phoenix and Merfolk Branchwalker, which was another of the Explore creatures from Rivals and from Ixalan block. This was my number 10.
Nice.
Certainly well deserving of being on this list. Very good card, just nothing but value in green, which doesn't always get the most value stuff, but when they do get it and it's attached to a creature, it is something to look out for.
And a nice take on Merfolk. You know, I really appreciate that they did something different. It would have been very easy for it to be like, it's blue, it has Island Walk, do the thing. And it's like, no, here's green Merfolk. And they have this Explore thing and sort of the flavor of that. And I thought it was a really fresh take on an old creature type.
It's a little shocking, at least to me, or maybe it just kind of shows you how unbelievably powerful all that Amonkhet and Kaladesh stuff was, that Wild Growth Walker saw in 0 play until they left. Like actual 0. That card that gains you 3 life and gets
so
bigger.
Funny.
Like every time something explores, and there's plenty of things that explore, an entire enchantment that makes things explore again, like, and yet could not stop the ridiculous combination.
I mean,
cards.
I think if you compare the mono red decks pre-rotation to sort of what they're doing now, I feel like they were just too fast. Where I mean, don't get me wrong, the decks now, and Ruben can certainly verify this because you're kind of our mono red person, but they were you just couldn't be bothered with that. Like, yeah, it's cute, you'll still be dead. Whereas the red decks now have slowed down just a little bit,
just enough.
They could still kill it, but they're still just not as fast to where you can really get that engine going and gain that life.
Well, the thing that was always holding Wild Growth Walker back wasn't really the red decks, it was the control decks, where you're playing a 1/3 for 2 mana as your turn 2 play that doesn't do anything the turn it comes into play, whereas you could be playing, a Glint Sleeve Siphoner, or you could be playing some other way to gain advantage, and Wild Growth Walker just wasn't doing anything that you really cared about. Now you have this sort of mid-range world that we live in where, the Boros decks, sure, they're fast, but they require a lot more of the attacking and blocking than the mono red decks did. They did a lot of their damage outside of combat or had a lot more haste creatures. Whereas and then you've got the more controlling strategies, and you've got the Golgari mid-range kind of strategies in the middle, and a Wild Growth Walker can really just take over.
Yeah, you also had Heart of Kieran and Glorybringer, which would just laugh and fly over it.
Well, Glorybringer, that was the numbers were the problem because Glorybringer dealt 4 damage to kill it, and Chandra dealt 4 damage to kill it. So it was just, even if you get it on turn 2 and you could fire it on turn 3, they could kill it on their turn 4 with Chandra or turn 5 with Glorybringer and just set you back too far. It was, yeah, but it sees play now, which is great, but it's just one of those things. Let's move here to number 5. I don't have one. It's higher on someone else's list. So, Ruben, what's your number 5?
My number 5 is my highest entry from the core set M19. And you won't open one in a booster pack. This card caused more consternation and more upset Reddit and YouTube comments, more Twitter discussion, and more philosophical discussion about the purpose of the Buy a Box promo than I ever thought I would ever see in my entire life. My number 5 is Nexus of Fate.
Yeah.
Nexus of Fate is 5 colorless and 2 blue mana for a grand total of 7 mana. For the Buy a Box promo from M19, it is an instant. Take an extra turn after this one. If Nexus of Fate would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, reveal Nexus of Fate and shuffle it into its owner's library instead. Also gives you a nice little story moment from Sarkhan. That essentially the moment Fate Reforged, where we switched from the Khan's storyline to the Dragon's storyline, which I thought was super interesting and a fun little dip back into the Magic lore, because we also got obviously Sarkhan back in M19 as well. This card saw a good amount of play, which is why it caused so much consternation. It was a staple of the Turbo Fog deck that became popular at one point earlier this year. The blue-white control decks were using Nexus of Fate. It's become a popular card at Commander as well. Being an instant that allows you to take an extra turn. Also, if you're able to deck yourself in some way, Nexus of Fate being the last and only card in your deck over and over and over again can be a lock. Just an incredibly powerful card with just the right numbers to make it playable. And as a result, a problem, because people didn't like that the Buy a Box promo was a wanted card, even though there were more copies, technically, of Nexus of Fate available in the world than there were of any one given mythic at one time. Became popular as a joke proxy, people writing the word Nexus on a mountain. That became a meme for about 2 weeks. Nexus of Fate, I think, definitely in the conversation for card of the year. In terms of how much conversation it's done.
Yeah, this is my number 8, and some people had to do the proxies. You know, you'll remember the Pro Tour 25th anniversary. David Williams, Ben Rubin, Eduardo Sajalik, and a few others had to use judge proxies because the foils had been marked otherwise. Because you could only get them as foil. Foil sometimes is prone to warping or just other ways to have it be distinguishable from the rest of your deck, and so they had to do that. You know, and this had been kind of coming for a while. You know, Wizards has started printing cards they decided that they were going to print cards that were in the set, even though that they weren't in booster packs. We first started seeing this with the Planeswalker intro decks. You know, they had this policy that they were legal in standard, and the cards typically had a low power level. And then when Dominaria came out, we had Firesong and Sunspeaker, which didn't see any play in standard, but the Commander players were loving it, and they were like, yes. And that was the first indication that Wizards was flying a little too close to the sun, no pun intended. And then, you know, this card comes out and people were already kind of upset about Buy a Boxes and whether or not they should be relevant. And we had that discussion on the show. And then all of a sudden this card came out and people were like, there's something here. Like, this is not a bad card. And then cut to it becoming a deck with Teferi and Karn. And then there was just this huge, you know, need for this card. They ended up releasing more copies on Magic Online to accommodate the demand. It was a tier 1 deck. I remember seeing on Twitter, people willing to do ridiculous things for a copy that were like, I will buy boxes right now. You can keep it. I just need these cards. And so, you know, you were either playing Nexus of Fate or you're playing something to beat it. But it was just one of the most controversial cards of the year.
Wizards had a good idea. The idea was, we want you to go to your local store and we want you to buy your boxes there because we're about to get in bed with Amazon and that's going to do really ugly things to your store sales. So let's give you a reason to show up to your FLGS. And Firesong and Sunspeaker was a perfectly, in my terms, in my mind, ultimately was very good in terms of its design and what it did. It got Commander players excited. Nobody played it in standard. That's cool, which means it didn't get on some crazy run of expensiveness. It was just, oh, here's what the card cost. It came down over in time, and that was fine. And then Nexus of Fate showed up, and oh god. and everyone started getting really upset. And everyone started noticing it was very, very good. And everyone started playing it. And then there was this crazy Turbo Fog or whatever deck that was being played with it. And now Wizards has to come out and say, look, there are more copies of Nexus of Fate out there than any other mythic in the set. Would you guys please stop flipping out? These things are not as rare as you think they are. They were going for like 40, 50 bucks or something crazy. They got up to at one point. Because if you recall, ever since Magic 2010, they started giving out buy a box booster promos. You buy a box, you get this promo. Okay, cool. Well, they're always generally kind of poop. There for a while, they were pretty decent. Celestial Colonnade was one. Surgical Extraction was one, for example. But by and large, they were terrible. And so we went from Wildfire Eternal. Anybody have any idea what that card did? No, exactly. Thank you. Burning Sun's Avatar, which at least I know because I've played it in Singleton.
Right. I know of Wildfire Eternal because I was briefly building Mono Red Itali Commander, and I thought it might be good in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
it's like afflict 3,
4,
and it like gates whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not in the top 10.
It's not very good. The point is they were crap, and Wizards like, okay, we're gonna make them a little bit better, but we're gonna ideally make them casual. And we're going to let you get them only at your store because we want to drive sales. And it drove sales like nuts. It worked. What they wanted to happen worked. The incentive was put in the right place. People went to stores. Like Cool Stuff Games sold more boxes than ever before. I think sold more boxes only beaten by like Return to Ravnica or Return to Zendikar or whatever, Battle for Zendikar, which was a huge, huge set. The point is, it went out of hand. Oh God, it kind of broke. I mean, clearly we all respect the card in that it's Aaron's number 8, it's my number 7. And it's Ruben's number 5 because this card was a wrecking ball to what a buy a box promo is. And I feel fairly confident this is the reason that the Haunt of Hightower is a 6-mana card and not a 5-mana card. Just in case they broke it, let's not keep breaking it. All right. Let's see. And Aaron, you do not have a number 5 either.
I don't.
So let's move on here to number 4. And I want to talk about my number 4 because this is one of those, like, it's just been good all year. It's been good from the start. It was great from when it was printed. It's just a $10 rare that stayed a $10 rare. Nothing changed from when before the rotation and after the rotation. This is one of the best removal spells they've ever made. Bedevil's coming, as it were. Bedevil's coming for the crown.
Bedevil went down to Georgia.
That's right. So, but when you Bedevil and
Planeswalker or creature to kill.
That's right. But Vraska's Contempt has just been an all-star, has just stayed in the format. It does everything you want it to do in terms of what do you want your removal spell to do? I want you to get rid of it. They can't reanimate it. Just get out of here. Gone. Vraska's Contempt is 2. That's right, gone. Vraska's Contempt is 2 black, 2 generic mana. It is a rare from Ixalan. It is an instant that exiles target creature or planeswalker, and you gain 2 life. And that 2 life is very, very important and often matters a ton. You're not dead until you get to the 0, but this will keep you a little bit further from that 0. And it helped a lot against black-red. It helped a lot against the mirror match. It helped a lot against these days for black-green, having answers to everything. Like, this is just, it's just fantastic.
This paired well with the blue-black Torrential Gearhulk. This was a very popular target for that. If it was annoying the first time, imagine it the second time for free. God Pharaoh's gift decks were a thing. The Scarab God, which you talked about earlier, was very difficult to deal with the gods. This was a really great way to get rid of Hazaret and get rid of the Scarab God, or just to prevent your things from being reanimated. And so this is what, a $17 card now? Like, who would have thought a 4-mana removal spell is $17? Like, bless their hearts. Like,
wow. It's just
able
good.
to deal with gods. That's the big underline. Is it exiles? The 2 life is nice, especially against Hazaret. But yeah,
I mean, it's one of those cards that, it does exactly what you want what's the best black removal spell in Standard. It's this one. It's rare. It's going to sell packs. It's going to sell singles. And that's a good thing. This card could easily have been uncommon or whatever, but they made it rare so we could have something powerful to have at the top end. So let's move on here to Ruben. What's number 4?
My number 4, when you talk about early 2018, there was no card that caused more discussion than this one. So let's talk about Baneslayer Angels and Rogue Refiners and Flametongue Kavus and Jackal Pups for a second. Let's flash back to January of this year. Baneslayer Angel gets brought up a lot, as Patrick Sullivan says, as the kind of card when sometimes you play it and you run away with the game. Your opponent can't kill it and you're coasting. Sometimes what actually happens is that they kill it and you're actually behind. They use a Doomblade and cast a Divination. And now that's actually bad for you to cast this. The range of card going anywhere from bad because it lost value on the way out, or I won the game, and all of the things that happened in the middle are really good. And that's really playable. These creatures are just summon, draw a card, or jackal pups that are more to the center. They're less replayable over time. And Ravenous Chupacabra is the exact type of card that makes sure that Baneslayers can't show up in decks. Ravenous Chupacabra is my number 4, and Patrick Sullivan's rant on the Star City Games tour is part of the reason why. Ravenous Chupacabra is 2 colorless, black for a 2/2 beast horror, which was printed in Rivals Vixen and Masters 25.
Mm-hmm. As the card
When
from
Ravenous
Rivals.
Remember Masters 25? Neither do I. Chupacabra enters the battlefield, destroy target creature and opponent controls.
Good, powerful, straightforward,
Yeah.
clean.
And one of his famous quotes was that it'll see play as a 4/of throughout its lifetime, and if it doesn't, then there are bigger problems with standard. And when it wasn't seeing play, decks like Approach of the Second Sun and Turbo Fog and other decks that don't use creature combat, things that Wizards of the Coast wants to avoid, were being the most popular decks. So sort of bore out a little bit, although it's not as popular as it once was. Still seeing play in those black-green mid-range kind of decks. But yeah, I mean, it was a lot of people thought it was a huge design fiasco.
Yeah. And ended up not really doing that. You know, it's certainly good. It certainly does its thing. But, you know, even the God Pharaoh's Gift stacks, you know, still remained blue-white for the most part. Or they went in that weird aggro direction where they were like blue-red for a couple weeks. There was that weird thing we saw at the or I think it was a GP where it was like you were using just crappy creatures with God Pharaoh's Gift, which was fine. But, you know, there were so many possibilities with this card and none of them really played out. And so it really did end up being okay. It's fine.
It didn't. Right. It wasn't quite, Chicken Little level, as it were. There was definitely some truth in terms of what Ravenous Chupacabra sort of keeps down and keeps out of formats. It was very, very good. It was played, but when it wasn't played, I think you could tell that maybe the format wasn't in such a good condition as to start with.
Right. Saw a ton of play with those Scarab Gods because you could make 4/4 Chupacabras, obviously.
So it's not often that I feel like I broke the format. And Wizards has lately been doing these silly things that you guys should freaking be a part of because they're awesome on Magic Arena, where they'll do silly stuff. And Kibler had his own batch of silly stuff, which is whenever you play a creature with converted mana cost 4 or higher, you draw a card. This card's pretty stupid when it comes with a cantrip on top of it. It's great. And then they kill it, and then I'll get my Gravedigger to get it back or whatever. At the
Gravedigger.
Yeah, that was the key. That was the key card.
Where you play Gravedigger.
Yeah, and you draw a card, and it was nuts because you got back to Chupacabra. It's insane. So at the end of that format, and I played a whole bunch of it, I had a 70.5% win percentage. It was ridiculous. It was so good. You should play it. It's fun. Anyway, but Ravenous Chupacabra is a hell of a creature and one we shall remember. Yeah. Aaron, what's number 4?
My number 4 is another card that has been around for a while. It was part of a dominant strategy in Modern last year and faded a little bit this year. And then it came roaring back. But more importantly, it helped birth a new archetype in Legacy. We got to see the Team Pro Tour that happened this year. Team Channel Fireball, I believe it was, LSV's crew showed up with this as their Legacy deck. And this was a really great way to get into Legacy. Legacy and Vintage are famously expensive formats. And what better way to get into a format than by not needing to buy fetch or buy dual lands when you can just do with your old shock lands you got laying around. Number 4 is Death Shadow. So Death Shadow is 1 black. It's a creature type avatar, 13/13. Death Shadow gets -X/-X, where X is your life total. So Death Shadow's been a thing in Modern for a while. We had the Traverse version where you could use Delirium to go looking for them and play Tarmogoyfs. And then there was the Grixis version with Tassiger and Gurmag Angler and Kolagon's Command and Stubborn Denial and things like that. And that was fine. We know Death Shadow. Most of us are prepared for it. It's fine. Then this Team Pro Tour comes out, and there are some folks who show up with this blue-black version of Death Shadow that runs Ravnica duels in Legacy, which, you know, Underground Seas are what, 400, 500 a piece now? Screw that. Show up with your water eater. It's fine. And it's really a surprise that Death Shadow, I'm really surprised it hasn't seen play in Legacy before, because it's perfect for Legacy. It's just 1 mana. It's what you want to be doing. But they started pairing it with main deck reanimates, and snuff outs and thought seizes and street race, and just this really sweet deck that has introduced people to Legacy. I was at Eternal Weekend a couple months ago, and I faced at least 2 or 3 opponents who were like, I would have never touched Legacy until that deck came out. And so it made the format much more affordable. If all you have to really worry about is Forest of Wills, come play Legacy. This is a viable at least a tier 2 deck. You know, there's some fun plays with Swords to Plowshares, but other than that, it's very viable. And I was just really happy to see this card break out into yet another format.
I think it kind of shows 2 things. One is, I think there's a lot of old guard for those super old formats. I think there's probably some stupidly broken stuff in Vintage we've literally even never heard of. There's probably multiple decks that could be doing even more degenerate things than are even currently happening right now. However, there is no incentive for the best Magic players in the world to focus on finding those decks or those different strategies. So when they told them, hey, here's Legacy, go bust it, and they're like, all right, and they came up with something completely different you'd never seen before, and it works perfectly because you gave them the incentive to do the work. So that, to me, there's, you know, Magic has so many pieces to this incredible sort of puzzle that we build with our decks. It's hard to know which one is the most powerful, but if you tell people, hey, we'll give you thousands of dollars for figuring it out, something new comes out of it. So.
And I just want to kind of plug something I'm doing. VSL starts in a couple weeks. I've been invited to the next season, and Saffron Olive is also going to be joining us, who is not really known for playing a lot of Vintage. I think he said so himself, but having someone like him, introducing him to the Vintage card pool, I'm so excited to see what he's going to bring to the table. And I hope that he finds, you know, some things that the rest of us haven't found yet.
Right.
Let's hope so. All right, so let's move on here to number 3. I don't have one. It's higher on somebody's list. But Ruben, what's your number 3?
Y'all know I love me some red cards, but we did our worst cards top 10 a little while ago, and we talked at length, because I brought it up, we talked at length that usually they'll print what I called a garbage Phoenix in whatever set, and it's just a garbage Phoenix. It's just a Firebird that is horrific.
Can that please be an unstable card? Just
Garbage Phoenix?
just rising from the garbage.
They return from the graveyard and do something really stupid, and like usually the best we can hope for is like Ash Cloud Phoenix, but usually it's like a Magma Phoenix or a Shivan Firebird or something along those lines. But this year we got not 1 but 2 excellent red Phoenixes, and both of them have a converted mana cost of 4. Shout out to Rekindling Phoenix. Well done. Good work out of you. But I'm not paying 4 mana. That's paying retail. We all know that things that are free, the best things in life, are free. And Arclight Phoenix is free. Ooh. Arclight Phoenix is my number 3. 3 colorless mana and a red mana for a 3/2 mythic rare Phoenix from Guilds of Ravnica. It has flying and haste, and it has a line of text that has shifted standard and modern forever. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you cast 3 or more instant and sorcery spells this turn, return Arclight Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield. The blue-red Drake's deck was one of the most popularly played standard decks at the most recent Pro Tour. Is It Phoenix went back-to-back at a SCG Tour recently, winning both the standard and the modern event.
Wow.
Being able to chain cantrips together, particularly bringing back one of my favorite cantrips into popularity in modern, Thought Scour, one of my favorite cards of all time that I always want to see more play. And finally, with Arclight Phoenix, probably will.
It's perfect.
Not only that, but Goblin Electromancer, Radical Idea, Opt, you know, Serum Visions, Lightning Bolt. Not that Lightning Bolt needs to see any more play, but you know what? Shout out to Lightning Bolt. Arclight Phoenix is just a excellent, amazing card that spawned new archetypes and is going to be here for a long time to come. Because as its flavor text says, some storms never blow over.
This was my number 5, and I definitely have to eat my words on this one because I remember when we did the set review, I wasn't sure. I was like, 3 spells is a lot of work. Like Bloodghast, I just have to play a land. Like, I don't know, you guys. And then cut to, you know, it becoming part of Is It Drake's Standard, and cut to it being a successful archetype in Modern. It's the reason that I played Mono Red during my last Patreon stream. I would never play Mono Red, but you give me the opportunity to play Cathartic Reunion, Tormenting Voice, and this, I'm in. And you play Fiery Tempers. There's so many ways you can build this. You know, there is this Is It version that people like Ross Merriam have played, but then there are people like Sean McLaren playing sort of a mono red version, which is what I really enjoyed. And so, you know, this card is just everything I want to be doing, and it got me to play a color that I wouldn't normally ever touch. And I had so much fun. You know, it's the reason why Manamorphose is a $20 card. Why?
Uncommon.
Common and uncommon.
Those are going to help pay for my Zancha deck, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Woof. Well, look, Arcalike Phoenix is one of those cards that I love that play design basically said every guild has a thing, and the Is It deck is all about them spells, playing the spells again, making those spells happen. Here is your payoff. Here is your mythic payoff to make that deck look amazing, and when it happens, it feels so good. They gave the Electromancer, that all those pieces come together, and it just feels terrific. And being able to use stuff like Phyrexian Mana Gutshot with this thing is just filthy. It's filthy is what it is. And I mean, Thought Scour, oh, I mean, could you get a better card?
Chart Course,
Yeah.
I mean, Tormenting Voice, like you mentioned, just some of my favorite things.
It is terrific, and it is super, super powerful. And Aaron and I thought the exact same thing about it because we both have it at number 5.
Oh, yay.
Yeah, we have a higher same. Yeah, that happens every once in a while, which is really cool. So, Aaron, what's your number 3?
My number 3 was the first card that I can remember seeing from Guilds of Ravnica and really just opening the set with the Sucker Punch. You know, we saw this card and it had an amazing effect on it that we hadn't seen in years. And it had immediate, you know, there were many people who were interested in this card, you know, people who play different archetypes, but it also made you want to know more from a story perspective. You know, it was a card that seemed to predict the death of a character who we had seen in previous sets before, being killed by another character who we had seen before, and us kind of wondering, whoa, not only is it good, but why are they dead? And why does it look like that? And why are they keeping it? And I need to know more. And to me, that is the best way to open a set, is not only with a very good card, but with hooks that make you want to know more. My number 3 is Assassin's Trophy. So Assassin's Trophy is a black and a green. It's an instant from Guilds of Ravnica. It says destroy target permanent. None of that non-land nonsense that the Wizards normally springs on us. Permanent, anything. An opponent controls, its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle their library. In older formats, you're not really running very many basic lands, especially the older the formats. And so a lot of times this is just a free kind of a Vindicate, if you will. Whatever it is, get rid of it. In Vintage, you know, you're only able to run 4 wastelands and a strip mine. Well, if you're playing Bug, you essentially have more ways to get rid of a land in a format that really revolves around its lands, its Solarian Academies, its Library of Alexandria, Bazaar of Baghdad, Mishra's Workshop. It's terrifying that you essentially have 8 ways to get rid of a land like that. And if you're not running any basics, which a lot of us aren't, it's free. There's literally no downside to this. Sees play in every format. It's turned around the Tron matchup for the Gen folks in Modern. They don't fear Tron anymore. You know, before they were running 4 Fulminator Mages and praying for Daylight. Not anymore. So it's changed, you know, matchups for people in older formats. It's been big in Standard. But it was just such a pun. Asperia is dead, Henny. She's not coming back. And Veraska killed her and is potting the plants in her head. Like, it just had so many, you just wanted to know more. And this card just really knocked it out of the park.
Wow. I mean, the card power level certainly was there. It's just that this set the set on fire, as it were. This is one of those where I could show you like the sales chart for the booster boxes, and it's like, whatever. Assassin's Trophy, oh my God.
This came out before Eternal Weekend, and I remember just kind of saying to myself, like, it was so exciting, but on the other hand, I was like, I'm going to need to spend $120 for a play set of these, aren't I? And just because they were going for $30 a pop, and I was like,
and it's gone down since then, of course.
Yeah,
it's about $11-12 these days, which is, I think, reasonable.
It's not 4 of play in every format as the best deck, but certainly had a huge impact. And you know, I've always been of the opinion that when Jund is the best deck in Modern is a great format. When black-green mid-range is good in Standard, Standard's a great format. When you have those sort of interactive pieces like Assassin's Trophy, like Abrupt Decay, like Maelstrom Pulse, the format is just better, I think. And so I like that Assassin's Trophy exists, even though it got super hyped and, you know, it didn't live up to its own hype.
Sure.
But that's because it built up so much hype for itself.
Right.
It's still very, very good.
Yeah, absolutely terrific. And again, an all-star set. This is one of the cards that you're going to talk about when you talk about Guilds Ravnica and what was important in it. But Aaron, I got to know, are you basic because you have no basics, or are you basic because you got basics?
That's a good question. Oh my
Depends on
god!
the format, usually.
Oh,
Oof.
wow. Oh,
The philosophers in the YouTube comments, feel free to weigh in on that.
got to ask the real questions, y'all.
No, the real question is, what do you call this card? So, like, when you target it, do you say like
Astrophy.
Astrophy.
Like Atrophy.
Right. Wow.
It could be Atrophy. You can atrophy that card.
We're a family show. All right, we're going to move on here.
It's like a catastrophe.
Exactly. Move on here to
Cat.
number 2. I am the only one with a number 2, as
Right.
both of you guys have hires.
my last hire?
Similar page.
Well, you'll certainly know this card. We saw a lot of it. I will admit that I was an idiot and I doubted it for just half a second before it showed up as a 4 of in freaking everything. As it showed up for the entire chunk of the year that it could in multiple different archetypes. Like it started as just the mono aggro thing, and then it was the 2-color aggro, and then it started showing up like the God of Pharaoh's decks. It's the weirdest thing ever. This card is valued. This card is in every cube now. Will be in for every cube forever because the card advantage of this card is stupid. And I can't believe I didn't see it at the time, but Bomat Courier is one of the most important defining cards of this entire year. This card is stupid. It's 1 generic mana for a 1/1 rare artifact construct. It has haste. And whenever it attacks, you exile the top card of your library face down. You do not look at it. For 1 red, you discard your hand, and sacrifice it. Put all cards exile with Bomat Courier into their owner's hands. This card is ridiculous. I have drawn so many cards for this thing.
Legacy Delver has been known to play with it at different points. I remember just playing Standard recently and just being like, before it rotated, and just being, I hadn't played much Standard. You know, I knew that it was a thing. I knew it was going on, but until I experienced it, I was like, this is dumb. I was like, you had nothing, and I saw you, and then you're drawing 4, and, you know, like you kind of mentioned with Experimental Frenzy, if you're playing a bunch of cheap burn or just cheap things, that is huge. Like the ability for a red deck or an aggressive deck to refuel like that, we just haven't really seen before. And it was just game changing. Like just watching it go down, of like, Jesus. Yeah.
I mean, you run your Bomat Courier into whatever, so you get that extra card. Like that was a ton of the format all year.
I mean, 'tis the season, right? It's the Christmas season coming up, and I love paying layaway. And when you play a Bomat Courier, you're paying layaway. You're investing in your future. You've got a plan for the future, and that is drawing 4 cards after you've already attacked with your Hazaret, and it's been great. Bomat Courier is spectacularly good. I was really excited when it started seeing some people were starting to experiment with it in Legacy, in like the Rug Delver decks as their card draw engine.
Mm-hmm.
Card is just spectacularly good and powerful, and boy, I love attacking with 1.
I mean, this is a card.
I got a Bomat Courier to draw 9 cards disallowed once.
Oh my god,
that was not fun.
Ooh,
good.
Woof. Yeah, that's incredible. This card just, as a piece of card advantage, man, it went from what does that card do to, oh my god, it's the best thing you can do on turn 1 for like a year and a half or something. It was ridiculous. All right, so let's move on here to our number 1 through the process of elimination. I know what at least one of these is, but we'll figure it out. Ruben, what is your number 1?
So before we made the Jaya Ballard pie bet, I originally was planning on making a pie bet on this card. Unfortunately, the word goblin appears in the alphabet before the word Jaya, and I kind of got spoiled by a couple of red mages who came in and said, y'all pay attention, Goblin Chain Whirler about to run this whirler. Making the world go round. Goblin Chain Whirler is red for a 3/3 Goblin Warrior with first strike, originally from Dominaria. When Goblin Chain Whirler enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control. This thing did something that very few cards have ever done before. It kept Llanowar Elves from top-8ing a Pro Tour.
It's true.
Pretty much single-handedly. It was the reason why Mono Red was the best deck for a lot of 2018. It is the best thing that you can do for 3 mana. There are very few cards in any cubes that are both red and don't have haste that cost 3 or 4 mana. And Goblin Chain Whirler is one of them. Just an extremely potent, powerful, best thing that you can be doing on turn 3, bar none, in the mono red decks. 3 red mana symbols in the top right corner is exactly what I want to be doing with my life. It's a goblin, it's a warrior, it deals damage, it attacks, it blocks, Julianne fries, does everything that I could ever want a Magic card to do, and it dominated a Pro Tour by itself, and it was never a question that this was going to be my personal number 1.
There were discussions about, is this ban worthy? You know, people felt it was that oppressive. They felt like it was keeping other strategies out of the format. They felt like it was just doing too much. They felt like there was no way to compete with it. I just found it so amusing that we had just come off of banning, you know, cards like Etherworks Marvel, Evercool, Goblin. It just didn't really seem like it belonged in the same category. And it's just like, this is,
to be fair, neither does Rampaging Ferocity.
Justice for Ferocidon.
Justice for Ferocidon, please. That's still ridiculous.
I remember watching, you know, and say what you will, you know, Ruben, I will compliment you a little bit here. You may not be expecting this, but the matchup with Wyatt Darby and the young man, Gonçalo. There was the young man from, I think it was either Brazil or Portugal. It was the mono red mirror. It was like the red versus black red mirror at that Pro Tour that Wyatt won. That was amazing magic. And I know people give aggro decks a lot of crap for being kind of linear, being unintuitive.
Gonçalo Pinto.
There we go. That was exciting magic. And what really ended up being the deal breaker there was the Goblin Chain Whirlers. Whoever stuck that Chain Whirler first really was running the game. And I enjoyed those matchups quite a bit. I didn't think I would. So.
You know what? I'll hand it to Wizards because, you know, spoiler seasons are a very funny, interesting thing. They are a unique piece of marketing to a very, you know, sort of expansive player base who wants to know absolutely everything they can. And their timing is also very important in that they showed you Llanowar Elves very early. They're like, we're going back to Dominaria, y'all. And you're just like, Dominaria, oh my God. And it's the Llanowar Elves, y'all. And, you know, Kibler's over here talking about it. And we're getting all excited. And they're like, oh, yeah, here's the best thing ever. It's going to kill it forever. And you're like, wait. I was sleeving up my beta one. And no.
Well, the good news is that the pendulum has swung back. And now in the current metagame, Llanowar Elves back on top, sharing the top with 4 or 5 other decks. Any green mid-range strategy is going to be using Llanowar Elves, whether or not Chain Whirler exists, because it's not as ubiquitous as it was this past spring and summer.
Right.
But certainly, it ran the world for quite a while.
It took a hot minute. Aaron, what's your number 1?
So, I like what I like. I have very unique tastes. I have very odd tastes, and I understand that. And I've mentioned throughout the show, you know, the cards that excite me don't necessarily excite everybody else. But sometimes you guys come around, and sometimes you start to get a taste of what I'm into and my world, and you come and play on my playground, and that is a really incredible feeling. My number 1 is a card that I called From the Jump, and everybody dismissed it. They're like, oh, Aaron, you crazy. And I'm like, fine, more for me. And so I started stockpiling this card. And the card served me well. You know, I won a vintage challenge thanks to this card. I went 3-0 my first night in the VSL with this card. And then slowly but surely, people started hopping on board. Cut to Pro Tour Bilbao, which I was working with Card Hoarder at the time. And I remember being in the back in the media room, and I'm supposed to be rooting for my team. It's what I'm there to do. I'm there to cover Team Card Hoarder. And I'm sitting next to the folks from Haruya. And a young man named Ken Yukihiro gets on camera, and he plays a deck, and I immediately start rooting for this guy when I should be rooting for my own team. And he opened the floodgates. Suddenly people are starting to run Goblin Lore, which shoots up to a $10 card. Burning Inquiry is play. I mean, what have we done? And it's all courtesy of my number one, which is Hollow One. So Hollow One is 5 colorless into artifact creature Golem. Hollow One costs 2 colorless less to cast for each card you've cycled or discarded this turn. It's a 4/4. You can pay 2 colorless and cycle it if you have to. You pair this with Burning Inquiry or Goblin Lore, and just look at the coverage moments. Riley Knight really hyping this up of here's Ken Yukihiro and three Hollow Ones past the turn. Modern had never seen anything like this before. We knew if you paired it with Bazaar of Baghdad, it was going to do dumb things, but people didn't even realize what was under their noses. Faithful Splitting, Street Wraith, I mean, Black Red Hollow One became a tier 1 deck. Leyline of the Void is now a $50, $60 card because you have to be prepared for this deck. I remember so many coverage moments. Huey Jensen famously having his head held in his hands. I think he was playing Sigrist, and they were in a Black Red Hollow One mirror. Siggy goes 2 Hollow Ones on turn 1, pass, and Jensen's literally just like... and just so many moments of this card. In Vintage, it also helps solidify Survival, which is now a tier 1 strategy. Do you know how hard it is to be viable in Vintage, not to mention tier 1? You pair Hollow One with some Basking Root Wallace, and you've got free Vengevines. I mean, it shook up Modern. It helped redefine Vintage. It's a card I've loved from the beginning, and I just couldn't think of any other card than this one.
And I like how Lavinia's like, how much money did you pay for that? How much is Hollow One?
No, I'm not happy about that.
Hollow One came very close to winning 2 Pro Tours this year. Mm-hmm. The Modern Pro Tour at the beginning of the year, obviously failing to defeat the Lantern strategy. And then the Team Pro Tour, very, very. I think that the Hollow One deck lost the finals there.
Yeah.
But certainly had a huge impact on the Modern metagame, particularly in the first half of the year.
Yeah, it's a hell of a card that just kind of keeps coming back due to whenever there's some crazy draw and discard, whenever there's some sort of filtering, there's some sort of milling. Hollow One's like, yo, dog, I'm right here. It's cool. It's fine. And you got to make cards like Lavinia just to stop crazy stuff like this from happening because, oh my God. But go to my number one here. And
our number 2, I think.
I think it's your all's number 2. I don't know what Aaron's number 9 is, but...
Oh, my number 9 was Goblin Chain Whirler. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's number 9? Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So that means, again, process elimination. Pretty sure this is your all's number 2. This card is bananas. It was bananas from the moment it showed up. It created some really stupid decks. It's never stopped being played. It will probably not stop being played. It's seen play in older formats because it's basically 3 mana, even though it says it's really 5 mana, but it's not. You gotta check those credentials because Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, showed up and whew, we were holding out for a hero, y'all. And and then he came and he was like, yo, dog, got this. Busted Nexus of Fate, all over Modern, all over Standard, Jeskai Control. You know, this is one of the best Planeswalkers ever printed. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, showed up in Dominaria. Is a legendary Planeswalker Teferi, of course. It is mythic. Starts with 4 loyalty and has a +1 of draw a card at the beginning of your next, or the beginning of the next end step. Untap 2 lands. -3, put target non-land permanent into its owner's library, 3rd from the top. Or -8, you get an emblem with whenever you draw a card, exile target permanent and opponent controls. Which we got to the point where mirrors would have them go off, or have their emblems go off, so they could start removing the other blue producing lands, so they could successfully resolve a Nexus of Fate or whatever it was so they could finish their loop. And oh my God. Yeah. So this card is just bananas and it's great and very awesome.
Jace who? There are people out there, speaking of conspiracy theories, you'd mentioned one earlier, Ruben, about, Emrakul being in the moon. There are people who think that one of the reasons why Wizards was so okay with unbanning Jace the Mind Sculptor in Modern is because they knew Teferi was coming down the pipe and they were like, you guys aren't even going to want this when you see this. And Teferi saw play in Vintage, when you can untap a Library of Alexandria. Seems fine.
Draw a card and untap a library. Yeah.
Play in Vintage. I've had it. I've looked across the table and saw one in Legacy, Blue White Miracles. Modern. God bless them. There are those people in Modern who play Jeskai when it's good, when it's bad, and this gives them more of a reason to do that. We've seen a Blue White version with Terminus that has been seeing play in Modern, and I don't think you would be seeing that without Teferi. It's sort of standard. This was something that the Blue White approach decks are playing towards the end there because why not? It needed to be good, and it is $55 good currently. I mean, it's just bananas.
Mono Orange Control in the hands of Greg Orange. The Citrus Assassin won the Pro Tour with 4. Obviously, he would win the Pro Tour with Blue White Control, and Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, a big reason why. Probably the best Planeswalker in Modern, ? maybe tied with one of the Lilianas.
When you can literally play Jace the Mind Sculptor right now, and Ruben's like, huh? Whatever. Teferi, right? Am I right or am I right?
Is that what I said?
No, you said, is it one of the best ones? And you didn't even mention Jace the Mind Sculptor. And I'm just like, wow, that's where we're at. Wow.
Better than Jace the Mind Sculptor. It might not be as good as Karn Liberated. It might not be as good as Liliana, either The Last Hope or The Veil. But it's up there. It's in the conversation. It dominates, blue-white control, I think is this, is a top 5 archetype right now in Modern. And Teferi is a big reason why. And, obviously the Turbo Fog Nexus of Fate deck was hugely popular as a result of the +1 for Teferi, letting you cast Root Snare to be able to protect it and start your loop. Just a hugely important card from this year. And it's why I have a business card now. It's got me on the business card. Let me see if I got a copy of my business card here.
Got one of those there? You can show off. Well, look, here was the secret. Here was the key as to why Teferi, bam, look at that. Here was the key as to why Teferi was so important. When we talk about Planeswalkers, we often bring up the fact that they have to protect themselves. But here's the thing about blue-white. You don't really care so much about protecting yourself as keeping the shields up. And keeping the shields up is what 2 mana gives you. It gives you negate, gives you essence scatter, gives you, syncopate for 1. Like, it gives you a bounce spell, gives you a blink of an eye or whatever. Seal away. It gives you something to react with and react to. And that's why Teferi is so strong, because it's giving you exactly what the blue-white deck wants to protect itself, which is give me some mana, let me bring the shields back up, and protect this awesome walker that just went to 5 loyalty on turn 5. Which is,
as the Wu-Tang says, you got to protect your deck.
That's what you got to do. And that was your all's number 2. Is that correct?
My number 2, yeah.
Awesome. Well, there you go. So that was our top 10 cards of 2018. You'll see them on the screen now for your review. Take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about, and we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me, and happy holidays to everybody.
That's right. Thank you, Ruben.
Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
That's right. We'll be back before the new year, however.
Right.
With a new show.
For our awards.
For the Mixies.
With the Mixies.
We have our Reddit threads. I don't know when this episode's coming out, but if it comes out before the show, vote. Let us know what you're into. It'll be a fun time. That's awesome. All right, so move here to our final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, my co-host, Aaron Campbell, Ruben Bressler, you guys for watching and listening, and hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe, do everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at Magic Mikes, on Twitter at Magic Mikes Cast, our Magic Mikes subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Talk to us privately at MagicMikesPodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at Magic Mikes Podcast at Libsyn.com. Our find us on iTunes, or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.